iPhones are not real cameras. At least that's what some on social media will tell you. But are they right? Let's find out. In short, no. All decent smartphones, whether it be iOS or Android, are good cameras. Now, having established that, you can go on to the next video, or you can stay tuned and listen to my reasoning as to why they are real cameras. And first of all, I want to say that I'm putting all phones together here, whether it be a Samsung, whether it be a Google Pixel, or whether it be an iPhone. Any smartphone with a good camera system is a real camera. And this video was inspired by a post on Threads, of course, Threads, the land of the most opinionated photographers. And this thread simply asked the question, why do people not consider smartphones real cameras? And a lot of people did come in and say, well, I do think they're a real camera. But there were a few really lame excuses from people that felt smartphones were not real cameras. And I just want to detail some of those. The one that struck me the most was it doesn't shoot the triangle. Now, clearly he's referring to the exposure triangle, but he's also completely wrong. A smartphone with a camera does shoot the exposure triangle. Now, it's quite possible that the aperture is fixed, but on most smartphones, the shutter speed is controlled and the ISO is controlled. So there's your triangle. It's just one point of that triangle is fixed. Another very strange excuse was there's no viewfinder, so it can't be a proper camera. Well, how does that work? If you understand cinema cameras, the sort of stuff that shoots the big Hollywood blockbusters, they don't have viewfinders. They have monitors that are plugged into them to actually establish the shot. Does that make them not a camera? Absolutely ridiculous statement. And the simple fact is that all our mirrorless and DSLR cameras have LCD screens in much the same way as a phone. And there are certain stills cameras out there that don't have viewfinders either. They literally just have the LCD screen. So really, really lame argument on that one. There's no proper control. Well, again, this is absolute rubbish because plenty of camera apps out there allow you to control the shutter speed, the ISO, the white balance. They allow you to control multiple different file types, compression rates, the whole caboodle, whether it be stills images or video. They do have the controls. In short, these answers were just pure snobbery. And I want to give you a little anecdote about snobbery. In 1984, there was a 16-year-old lad that went to a local camera club. He'd been going there for about 2 or 3 months and he'd been shooting some nice pictures and he decided to enter his first competition. That competition was the biggest competition of the year and he put in a nice picture. It's this one. Because that photographer was me. I won that competition and I won it using a £50 Soviet camera. That picture then went on a tour, an exhibition tour around the camera clubs of London, and it got good reviews. It was actually given a 10+ out of 10 by the judges. But here's the thing. Some of the older, predominantly male members of the club refused to speak to me and refused to help me after I won that competition because I had beaten them using a Zenit 11, a £50 camera, and they were using £1,000 Nikons and Canons and £2,000 or £3,000 Hasselblads. It was pure snobbery. And I've never forgotten that, and I've never allowed myself to become that person. There's lots of them around, and these are the people that you see making these inane comments on social media. And the moral of that particular anecdote is just because you have the dollars, it doesn't mean you have the skill. You could spend £10,000 on the best camera gear you could buy, but unless you start to learn and study and practice, you will never have the skill to get the quality out of that camera. And the simple fact is, all cameras are tools. They merely do a job, and you need to pick the right tool for the job. Now, clearly, a commercial photographer shooting a billboard is not going to shoot an iPhone. He's going to use medium format, perhaps even large format film. But if the shoot can be done with an iPhone, then there's nothing wrong with shooting an iPhone. It's just a tool. Going back to the comment about not having control over smartphones, well, this is clearly rubbish. Most smartphones have apps. For example, Lightroom has a mobile camera app in that you can control shutter speed, you control white balance, you control all the things that you can control on a larger camera, perhaps with the exception of aperture. And yes, smartphones use computational photography. But here's the thing. You're going to see a lot more computational photography coming to your larger cameras, whether you like it or not. And yes, I'm sure you'll be able to turn it off, but it will be there. And in fact, any shot you take, be it a RAW or a JPEG on a mirrorless or DSLR camera, is to a certain extent computational. There has been some computational photography created within that image, particularly in a JPEG, where you're getting a baked-in colour white balance, you're getting a baked-in contrast and saturation. It is computational whether you like it or not. I just want to address a little bit about video as well as stills photography. Recently, a film director announced that his new movie was shot entirely on iPhone. And as you can imagine, social media was in uproar. There were people saying, yeah, okay, that's just a gimmick. He's using massive cinema lenses and he's got massive rigs on his iPhones and it's just a gimmick. And yes, he is using massive rigs and cinema lenses. But a cinema lens is still going through the iPhone lens and still going to an iPhone sensor and being read and recorded by the iPhone's actual electronics. The outrage was real and it was bizarre. It's bizarre when you consider who that director was. It's Danny Boyle, and it's his latest film, 28 Years Later, the sequel to 28 Days and 28 Months Later. He is not an unknown trying to prove himself. He is one of Hollywood's biggest known directors. He is known for his skill. He has won Oscars, Golden Globes, BAFTAs. This is not a man that needs to prove himself. This is a man that wants to use technology. So in summary, if you're outraged by the fact that a smartphone is a real camera, that's down to you. That's your insecurities, nobody else's. A good photographer will understand how to use whatever tool he has available to him, and he will use whatever tool is right for the job. And if a smartphone is right for a job, then there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It is a real camera. And here's the big news. Smartphones, iPhones are only going to get better. And they're going to get better quality images. They're going to find ways around reducing noise on small sensors, the higher contrast and lower dynamic range that smaller sensors have. They will find ways around that. Photography is changing. We saw the same arguments when digital came in. There were a whole bunch of Philistines that just said digital will never take off. Here we are. Put simply, if you don't like an iPhone as a camera, don't use an iPhone as a camera. But don't go pronouncing that it's not a real camera, because it is. There are people that can take better pictures than you using an iPhone. And there are people that will take a lot worse pictures than you using an iPhone. The simple fact is they're just using a tool, and it's down to you to have the talent to use that tool. Now, just to round out this video, I just want to say I'm actually shooting this video on 2 cameras. Over here is a small sensor on a DJI Pocket 3. This main camera is an iPhone 15 Pro, shooting H.265 in Apple Log on the Blackmagic app. Smartphones are not real cameras? I don't think so. So if you've enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you've really enjoyed it, a sub would be even better. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one.